Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Speak and Feel English. Today, we are diving into a topic that feels simple on the surface, but is actually deeply complex when you start living it: how to focus on yourself. And Ethan, I think this is something people struggle with more than they admit.
Absolutely, Mia. The idea of focusing on yourself sounds empowering, almost peaceful, but in reality, most people are constantly distracted by opinions, expectations, comparisons, and even their own inner doubts. So instead of focusing inward, they spend most of their time reacting outward.
That is so true. And I think the first misconception people have is that focusing on yourself is selfish. But in reality, it is the opposite. When you are grounded, aware, and emotionally stable, you actually show up better for others.
Exactly. It is about self-alignment, not self-obsession. Focusing on yourself means understanding your values, your goals, your emotions, and your boundaries. Without that clarity, you are basically living life on autopilot, guided by external noise.
I love that phrase, external noise, because honestly, that is what most of our distractions are. Social media, other people's achievements, opinions from friends or family, all of these slowly pull your attention away from your own journey.
And the more you compare, the more you lose your direction. Comparison creates confusion. You start questioning your own path, your pace, and even your purpose. That is why focusing on yourself begins with awareness, noticing where your attention is going.
Yes, awareness is step one. If you do not realize that your focus is scattered, you cannot fix it. Most people do not even notice how much time they spend thinking about others, what they are doing, what they think, how they are progressing.
And ironically, while you are busy watching others, your own growth pauses. That is the cost people don't see immediately. It's not just distraction, it's delayed progress.
So let's break it down. If someone is listening right now and thinking, I want to focus on myself, but I don't know where to start, what would you say is the first practical step?
I would say start by asking yourself one honest question. What do I actually want? Not what your parents expect, not what society suggests, not what looks impressive, but what genuinely matters to you.
That question sounds simple, but it's actually very uncomfortable because a lot of people realize they have been chasing goals that are not even theirs.
Exactly, and that realization can feel unsettling, but it's necessary because you cannot focus on yourself if you are chasing someone else's version of success.
And I think once you identify what you want, the next challenge is protecting your focus. Because even if you are clear about your goals, distractions do not disappear automatically.
Yes, they actually become stronger. When you start focusing on yourself, you'll notice more resistance, both internal and external. People might question you, you might doubt yourself, and old habits will try to pull you back.
That is such an important point. Growth is not just about moving forward. It's also about resisting the pull of your past patterns.
Exactly, and that is why focusing on yourself is a daily practice, not a one-time decision. You have to keep choosing it again and again, even when it feels difficult or uncomfortable.
So Ethan, now that we have talked about awareness and clarity in the first part, I think the next major challenge people face when trying to focus on themselves is emotional distraction. Because even if someone knows what they want, their emotions can still pull them in completely different directions.
That is absolutely true, Mia. In fact, I would say that emotional distractions are often more powerful than external distractions. You can turn off your phone or step away from social media, but it is much harder to step away from your own thoughts and feelings. Overthinking, insecurity, fear of judgment, and even past experiences can all interfere with your ability to stay focused.
Yes, and overthinking is probably one of the most common struggles people deal with. They replay conversations in their minds, imagine different outcomes, and analyze situations from every possible angle. But in the end, they feel mentally exhausted without making any real progress.
Exactly. Overthinking creates the illusion of productivity. It feels like you are working through something, but in reality, you are just circling around the same thoughts without reaching a conclusion. And the longer you stay in that cycle, the harder it becomes to take action.
And I think what makes it even more complicated is that people often justify their overthinking. They tell themselves that they are being careful or responsible,
when in reality, they are just avoiding action because of fear.
That is a very important point. Overthinking is often rooted in fear. Fear of making the wrong decision, fear of failure, or even fear of judgment from others. And until you address that fear, simply trying to think less will not solve the problem.
So how can someone actually manage overthinking in a practical way? Because as we said, it is not something you can just switch off.
Right. Instead of trying to eliminate it completely, you need to control it. One effective approach is to set limits on how long you allow yourself to think about a situation. Give yourself a defined period to analyze, and once that time is over, make a decision and take action.
That makes sense because it creates a balance between thinking and doing. You are not ignoring your thoughts, but you are also not letting them take over completely.
Exactly. And another important strategy is to shift your focus from outcomes to actions. When you are constantly thinking about what might happen, you create anxiety. But when you focus on what you can do right now, you regain a sense of control.
I really like that idea because it brings your attention back to the present moment. Instead of worrying about things that are uncertain, you concentrate on what is within your control.
Yes, and that shift is very powerful. It reduces mental noise and helps you move forward, even if you don't have all the answers.
Another emotional challenge that I think is very common is seeking validation from others. Many people struggle to focus on themselves because they are constantly looking for approval.
That is true, and it can be very limiting. When your confidence depends on external validation, your focus becomes unstable. You start adjusting your behavior based on what others might think, rather than what you truly believe is right.
And that creates a lot of confusion because you are no longer guided by your own values. You are reacting to other people's opinions.
Exactly. And the problem is you can never fully control how others perceive you. So if your self-worth is tied to their approval, you will always feel uncertain.
So focusing on yourself also means building internal validation, trusting your own judgment and being comfortable with your decisions, even if others do not fully agree.
Yes, and that takes time. It is not something that happens overnight. You have to gradually develop self-trust by making decisions, learning from your experiences, and recognizing your own growth.
And I think another important part of this is learning to be okay with discomfort. Because when you stop seeking validation, you might feel uncertain or even isolated at times.
That is absolutely true. Growth often feels uncomfortable, especially in the beginning. But that discomfort is a sign that you are moving away from old patterns and creating a new way of thinking.
And I think it's important for people to understand that focusing on yourself does not mean ignoring others completely. It means not losing yourself while engaging with others.
Exactly. It is about balance. You can care about others, support them, and maintain relationships, but at the same time, you need to stay connected to your own priorities.
And that connection comes from self-awareness. When you understand your values and your goals, it becomes easier to make decisions that align with them.
Yes, and that alignment reduces internal conflict. Instead of constantly questioning yourself, you move forward with clarity and confidence.
Another aspect that people often underestimate when trying to focus on themselves is time management. Because the truth is, focusing on yourself is not just a mindset. It requires actual time, intentional space, and a structured approach to how you spend your day. And if your schedule is constantly filled with distractions or obligations that do not align with your priorities, then no matter how motivated you feel, you will struggle to make progress.
That is a very important point. People often say they do not have time, but when you look closely, it is rarely about lack of time. It is about lack of clarity and control over how that time is being used. Everyone has the same number of hours in a day, but the difference lies in how intentionally those hours are spent.
Exactly. And I think one of the biggest issues today is unconscious time consumption. People are not even aware of where their time is going. A few minutes of scrolling turns into an hour. A short break turns into prolonged procrastination. And by the end of the day, they feel unproductive without understanding why.
Yes, and that lack of awareness creates a cycle. When you feel unproductive, you lose motivation. And when you lose motivation, you become even more distracted. Breaking that cycle requires you to first observe your habits without judgment. You need to see your patterns clearly before you can change them.
I agree.
And once you become aware, the next step is to create structure. Because without structure, your day will always be controlled by external factors, notifications, other people's demands, or random impulses.
Exactly. Structure does not mean rigidity. It means intentionality. It means deciding in advance what matters and allocating your time accordingly. When you plan your day with purpose, you reduce the chances of being pulled into distractions.
And I think prioritization plays a huge role here. Not everything deserves equal attention, but many people treat all tasks as equally important. As a result, they spend time on low-value activities and neglect the things that actually contribute to their growth.
That is true. One useful approach is to identify your high-impact activities, the actions that directly move you closer to your goals. These should always come first. Everything else should be secondary.
And this is where boundaries become essential, because sometimes the biggest distractions are not activities, but people. Whether it's constant messaging, unnecessary conversations, or social obligations, these things can quietly consume your time.
Yes, and setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable, especially if you are used to being available all the time. But if you do not protect your time, no one else will. You have to decide what you are willing to say yes to and what you need to decline.
And I think it's important to mention that setting boundaries is not about being rude or distant. It's about being clear and respectful, both to yourself and to others.
Exactly. When you respect your own time, others are more likely to respect it as well. And over time, this creates a healthier environment where you can focus without constant interruption.
Another thing that helps is creating dedicated focus periods. Instead of trying to multitask or switching between tasks constantly, you can set specific blocks of time where you focus on one thing only.
Yes, deep work is incredibly powerful. When you eliminate distractions and give your full attention to one task, your efficiency increases significantly. You achieve more in less time, and the quality of your work improves.
And I think people often underestimate how much energy context switching consumes. Every time you switch tasks, your brain has to readjust, and that reduces your overall productivity.
Exactly. That is why focusing on yourself also means focusing on one thing at a time. It is about depth, not just activity.
Let's talk about consistency, because I believe this is where most people struggle the most. It is relatively easy to feel motivated for a short period of time, but maintaining that focus on yourself over weeks, months, and even years, that is where the real challenge begins.
Absolutely. Motivation is temporary, but consistency is what creates long-term results. And the problem is that many people rely too much on how they feel in the moment. If they feel inspired, they take action, and if they do not, they stop.
Yes, and that creates an unstable pattern. Progress becomes inconsistent, and over time, that inconsistency leads to frustration.
Exactly. That is why discipline is so important. Discipline allows you to take action regardless of your emotional state. It creates stability in your behavior, which is essential for growth.
And I think one of the biggest misconceptions about discipline is that it has to be extreme or rigid. But in reality, discipline can be simple and flexible as long as it is consistent.
That is a great point. Discipline is not about doing everything perfectly. It is about showing up regularly, even if the effort is small. Small actions, repeated consistently, lead to significant results over time.
And this is where habits come into play. When you turn your actions into habits, they require less effort and less decision-making.
Yes, habits reduce resistance. Instead of forcing yourself to act every time, the behavior becomes automatic. And that is incredibly powerful when it comes to focusing on yourself.
But building habits takes time. And during that process, it's easy to lose patience.
That is true. People often expect quick results, and when they do not see immediate progress, they become discouraged. But real growth is gradual. It requires patience and persistence.
And I think another challenge is dealing with setbacks, because no matter how disciplined you are, there will be days when things do not go as planned.
Absolutely. Setbacks are inevitable, but the key difference is how you respond to them. If you see them as failures, you might give up, but if you see them as part of the process, you will continue moving forward.
So focusing on yourself also means developing resilience, the ability to keep going even when things are difficult.
Exactly. It is about maintaining your direction, even if your pace slows down.
As we come to the final part of this conversation, I think it is important to reflect on everything we have discussed and bring it together into a clear understanding. Focusing on yourself is not a single action or a quick decision. It is a lifestyle. It is something you practice every day through your thoughts, your choices, and your habits.
Absolutely. And what makes it challenging is that there is no fixed endpoint. You do not reach a moment where you can say, I have mastered this completely. It is a continuous process of self-awareness, adjustment, and growth.
And along this journey, you will face distractions, doubts, and external pressures. There will be moments when you question your path, when you feel uncertain, or when you are tempted to compare yourself with others.
That is completely normal. The key is not to avoid these moments, but to navigate them effectively. You have to remind yourself why you started and what truly matters to you.
And I think one of the most powerful things you can do is to regularly reconnect with yourself. Take time to reflect, to evaluate your progress, and to understand your emotions.
Yes, reflection is essential. It helps you stay aligned with your goals and prevents you from drifting away without realizing it.
And as you continue this journey, you will start to notice changes, not just in your achievements, but in your mindset, your confidence, and your overall sense of clarity.
Exactly. You become more focused, more intentional, and more resilient. And that transformation impacts every area of your life.
So if someone listening to this feels overwhelmed, what would you say to them?
I would say start small. You do not have to change everything at once. Focus on one area, one habit, one decision at a time. Progress does not require perfection. It requires consistency.
That is a powerful message, because often people delay starting because they think they need a perfect plan.
Exactly. But clarity comes through action, not just planning.
Thank you for being part of this conversation.
And if you found this helpful, make sure to follow for more meaningful conversations like this.
Subscribe to the channel, stay connected, and keep focusing on yourself.